Hey everybody, Constellation here. I'm here with the core leadership of Constellation, and we're doing a little Q&A today. So over the past couple weeks, basically our evangelist and community admin, CryptoFox, sent out a request for basically questions that everybody had that was kind of working around the ecosystem. Over the past couple weeks, we've published some really powerful papers on vision document that kind of painted the vision of Constellation, as well as a tokenomics paper where we talk about the deflationary and inflationary aspects of Constellation. And so hopefully that addressed many of your questions. But today we're going to take a little moment to just start to address these questions that were collected over the past couple weeks. So I'll leave it over to Benjamin Diggles to kind of drive all the questions and create that convo.
Thanks, Mr. Jorgensen. Yeah, VP of Business Development here, Benjamin Diggles, kind of orchestrating these questions in a way so that we're kind of going one team member at a time, so it's not kind of a scatter. We're going to actually start with Ben Jorgensen, so we're going to pass it back over to him to go through his questions, and then we'll take it from there. And I apologize if I botch any of the usernames. I'm going to try my best on those that asked them. And again, we really appreciate the questions. These are fantastic. So the first question is from the username Charlie. And the question is, where do I find current financial stats of the project?
Hey, Charlie, thanks for the question. If you mean financial stats, you can look at CoinGecko for our circulating supply and various wallet information on where tokens are held. As far as financials on the actual company, such as revenue or salaries or contracts, we're a privately held company. We're not a public company. And so we don't release those documents to people, to the public. And that's pretty much practice for any privately held company in the United States.
Awesome. Next one's from Crypto Sapper, a fairly similar question. How much cash on hand does the project have?
Yeah, so Constellation has several years of runway at this point, and the way that we've modeled this out are a couple different ways. We're taking into consideration market fluctuations and market dynamics, as well as revenue models and kind of growth models as well. So Constellation set ourselves up for success over the next several years. So that's kind of a broad layout of our runway.
Awesome. Great. Next question is from Kyle Mitchell. And the question is Constellation intended primarily for IoT economy, such as machine-to-machine or traditional financial services?
Yeah, Kyle, that's a great question. And I love getting into the weeds. What the answer is, we kind of address both. DAG is our financial component to Constellation and is essential for our ecosystem to exist. And Constellation's also focused on IoT. Namely, Constellation's core value proposition is providing an on-ramp for big data. So we provide big data tools through what we call Spore Technologies. And this is really to kind of append our technology as close as we can to the source of data. So really, we kind of picture ourselves as tackling the big data space. And what that means is big data is heavily used in machine learning and artificial intelligence, which is kind of all the craze right now. And so IoT happens to be one of those industries that aggregates and collects and creates a lot of data. So it's a logical source for us to kind of focus on.
Perfect. All right, we're going to do a little pivot over here to some token conversations, topics for you, Ben. This question is from Rich. How is Constellation Network company equity linked or different from the token?
Great question, Rich. This is something that we tackled both in Mathias's tokenomics paper as well as the vision paper. And one of the difficult things with most blockchain companies is trying to show real utility and value for a cryptocurrency and then bridge that with real world market dynamics and monetary incentives that create more runway or create a prosperous thriving business. And so while we're still early stages and the entire industry is in early stages, one of the ways that we are trying to bridge that is that any sort of partnership that we bring on, whether it's a paid consulting gig or they're paying to use our technology, we essentially stake or burn a certain amount of DAG relate to that partnership. And we articulated that in both of those papers. And really here, the mentality is that if we're doing a partnership, that the way we look at it is that they're licensing our technology and time to build something with that. And as such, we need some sort of representation on the actual network that we're building. And so that representation is really around staking or burning DAG today. Mathias will probably go a little later on talking more about some of the different deflationary components, but that's the way that we're linking equity to our token price today.
Next question is from Daryl Lau, and the question is, what is the release plan for the foundation tokens?
Yeah, thanks, Daryl. To date, there's really no plan to release foundation tokens. As I mentioned, we've got years of runway budgeted out, and really we're going to be coming up with a plan over this next several months with early node validators, or as a way to provide governance by the community. So this is our attempt to kind of decentralize some of this control and start to look at new models of governance, which our foundation tokens will come under.
Awesome. Thanks, Mr. Jorgensen. All well said. I'm going to pivot over to myself. A few questions here. The first one, also just a request, maybe you guys could, Wyatt, I think you're fine, but if you guys want to mute your lines, unless you're talking, that might help a little bit. So this question is from Kyle Mitchell, and the question is, what is Constellation's emphasis on an appealing user interface or experience? And I think this is a great question. I mean, I feel this is one thing that separates us from some of the other projects in the space, that we really wanted to make this very adoptable and approachable, especially from the enterprise perspective. And enterprise is used to being able to ingest key data through either mission critical dashboards, BI tools, and at the core of that really is our API, our Spore API model, which allows not only the injection of data from data sources, but in this capacity, being able to query that data and bring it into a UI. And so that really answers why it's appealing to the enterprise. So it's a great question. The next question is from Nikolai. Nikolai asks, in what form and in what ways are companies putting data on the ledger? Another great question. I mean, when you think about ourselves positioning Constellation as blockchain for big data, which I think is a really great way of looking at our project, we're not proposing that these companies put all their data on a ledger. That's kind of a reckless approach, as we all know. When you think about how we collect data as close to the source, during that process, we have validation criteria that really looks out for the data type, whether it's good, bad, missing, or whatever that criteria needs to be for the use case of the customer. And that validation criteria comes in the form of metadata that is appended to our ledger. And that's great because it can be queried at any time, kind of going back to that API, being able to find out anything forensically, what's happening from that data. But we are not storing the company's data per se on the chain. And in the case of state channels, data that consists of a state channel actually lives inside the state channel. And what's exciting about the light paper that's coming out is that there's some depth on how that actually works from the interoperation of that data from state channels and DAG. So it's really look into that to kind of get the answer of how the mechanics work from that perspective. The next question is from the handle, the Bay, and the question is, when do you figure out if you won the grant from NASA? Great question. We've been given a broad window of summer of 2019, so we're looking out for that and continuing to check in on it. That said, this is one of probably half a dozen grants that we have out right now. Others that we're also equally, if not more excited about, which we're going to be rolling out here in the next few weeks, kind of giving you some visibility when it makes sense on those. So pretty important summer right now, and going into the fall is when some of this stuff will start to percolate. That said, if you haven't had a chance to check out the proposal, feel free to read through it. And if you have any specific questions, you can direct them towards me, and I'd be more than happy to answer those. So that's the end of the questions for me. We're going to go ahead and pivot over to Wyatt next. So Wyatt, the first question for you is from Laura Renee. And the question is, what is the exact utility of DAG? Is it a value of transfer like IOTA?
Sure. So the short answer here is that it's a representation of throughput or transactions per second. The long answer is that it's actually quantified in terms of information gain that each individual node contributes within performing consensus. I go through a pretty extensive derivation of how we wanted to come up with the actual quantities and units in my generative economics paper. So you can find more there.
Great, awesome. So the next question is from David Atkins. How is DAG different than Radix, Hashgraph, or Phantom?
Cool, thanks Dave. So yeah, I'll let you guys do your own research to sort of figure out how each one is a bit different. But I would say that our fundamentally unique approach is that we wanted to actually create a consensus model that could operate on large amounts of data, as well as create some type of a user interface and tools around it that are very akin to what you'd expect in the data science or data engineering space. So our approach really here is to adapt the wider community of data engineers and data scientists, and also make them blockchain engineers.
Sweet. The next one's a little similar. This one's from Luther Gunderson. Regarding other DAGs such as IOTA or Nano, what do you like about these fellow projects in the DAG space?
Sure. So fundamentally, I just have to appreciate, someone who's, trying to trailblaze a new paradigm within any existing space. I think, they're really the pioneers like IOTA and people, which really beat us or were ahead of the curve, as well as, some of our contemporaries. It really takes, a lot to try and propose a new approach that's not been done before. So we got to really hand a torch to those who came first. And even though it might seem sometimes like a David versus Goliath scenario, we really think and are very confident in our approach and why we actually needed to build our own protocol as opposed to a tool on top of something else. And it was specifically so we could actually have this differentiator in creating an actual, data engineering tool.
Great. Okay, awesome. So the next question is from Nikolai. He's got a few for you here, Wyatt. The first one is, have you looked for an independent external audit of the code base?
Yeah, so we're always constantly actively engaging with individuals who are, testing, auditing, and providing feedback for the code base itself, as well as its applications. Both on a private, kind of like enterprise partnership level, but also from an open source perspective.
Great. Another question from Nikolai is, will this be all Scala, or what sort of interfaces are on the horizon?
So right now, you should really be able to once you're working on an application level, integrate or interface into any kind of JVM language or any kind of library that's using those. But for the current focus, we chose to write everything in Scala due to the resources available, and also the functional programming paradigm that we found really conducive to building this type of protocol.
Awesome. Another one from Nikolai. When will there be an example of a working Oracle type DApp on the main or side chain?
Cool. So, you can actually already find an example of what we've called our digital twin app. This is something that can notarize information coming in real time from any kind of Android device, and store that and create some kind of auditability, if you will, on those devices inside of a state channel. So you can find that on our GitHub repo. It's called Digital Twin, is the Android component, and this can be deployed as a state channel, and you can add more bells and whistles as you see fit. So please check it out and contribute.
Cool. Last one from Nikolai. How do you avoid noise on chain while making sure data is present on enough nodes to be accessed?
Sure. So this is a great question because it's actually kind of fundamental to what makes us different and able to kind of have the type of scalability that we desire. So we followed something called a microservices architecture, which is that each individual sort of small component of maybe a larger application can be broken down into small bite-sized chunks with known interfaces. And by that we meant that state channels themselves are each a microservice. So any kind of data that's coming from a specific application would be stored inside of its own state channel, and then access or references to it would only be stored on the DAG network. So DAG can really be thought of as like a financial state channel that connects all these different microservices, processing their own types and validating their own types of data, through like a decentralized, data marketplace. So the really short answer I probably should have started with is there really isn't going, there won't be noise on chain. The only kind of interactions will be transactions, either connecting state channel to user, state channel to state channel, or user to user on a transactional basis, all of which are rate limited, or a higher rate is accessed through a small optional transaction fee.
Great. That's awesome. Okay, so we got one last one for you here, Wyatt, and this one's from Marky G. Will the mainnet be downloaded software or application? Kind of a tricky question there.
Yeah, no, totally. So I'm gonna just sort of answer this the best I can because I'm sort of guessing what you mean. But in terms of an actual node per se, this isn't going to be something like a desktop application, but more so like it would require an actual deployment process. We're using something called Terraform that can automatically handle provisioning, deployment, and the act like starting the actual node itself on any kind of like cloud computing provider. Yeah, so if you guys want to actually to deploy nodes for mainnet, that would happen through some type of a tool like that, as opposed to like a desktop application.
Bam. Awesome. Okay. Well, thank you, Mr. Wyatt. We're going to go ahead and pivot over to Mathias Goldman, definitely not the least here out of the last. I like to call him Math Gold is the nickname I've given him. So Mr. Math Gold, this question is from Nikolai. Will DAG be swapped at mainnet or later?
Hey, Nikolai, that's a very good question. We will swap DAG. However, node stability and mainnet stability is one of our prime concerns. So we will swap the tokens a little bit after mainnet start.
Great. This next question is from a name that I can't pronounce, so I'm just going to spell it out, ANDIWJ. So I apologize on that. What does the deflationary token model for DAG look like? Okay, yeah, that's a very good question. And as Ben mentioned before, we have outlined some of the aspects of the tokenomics in the visionary paper that Ben wrote, but also in the big tokenomics paper and its summary that we published. But I'm going to go into the brief outline of what's happening here. So we have a decentralized network, which is governed by a deflationary token model in essence. So we have a limited supply of tokens, and that's the standard in deflationary tokenomics at this point. Within that box of a deflationary model, we have different other aspects. So we have more technologies, as Ben mentioned, as the enterprise arm for consulting. We will stake up to the first 15 clients. We will stake DAG, or rather burn actually DAG for each client that has been onboarded. For further conversations, we will be considering buying throughput on the exchanges, which creates demand in the network and in the exchange market. But we also have more deflationary aspects, which will come to fruition in the node. So we require 250,000 DAG to be staked for each node that is being run on the mainnet. So that's going to consume a decent amount of DAG tokens.
So all these aspects, they are kind of like infrastructure aspects. They are tied into the dynamics. But what I'm most excited about is actually the true utility of the token. So all the you can navigate all these metrics and come up with clever ways. But what's really driving value, demand, and utility is actually how is the token used in the network. And as Wyatt has pointed out, there's two main aspects, which is the purchasing of throughput beyond the rate limit, which is needed for any data pipeline, for any sensor network, for any validation stream that has a decent amount of data running. And the other one is DAG is the financial state channel, so we attach value to data. So that enables the data economy and a data marketplace of the future, where data can be exchanged trustlessly through DAG as a means of exchange. And that's what I'm really excited about, and that will drive adoption, that will drive utility, that will drive demand in the future for the token.
Awesome. Very good. So we got one last one for you here, Math Gold from Lay Fragile. And the question is, what are your plans for new exchanges?
Yes, so as a US company, we have to be a little diligent and careful how we approach this issue. We are always open to new listings. However, they have to come from the community or the exchanges themselves. So yes, we are open.
That's great. Well, since I have the mic, I think I'm going to go ahead and take us out here and conclude this. We appreciate all the questions. Keep a lookout for the light paper dropping today. We're going to continue to roll out more content to help identify and define not only the business, the technology, but also the token economics. That said, we're more than happy to do more of these. So please continue to ask questions so we can help demystify what it is we're up to and get you excited about Constellation's future. So we'll go ahead and conclude, and we really appreciate it. And thank you so much.
Okay. Bye-bye, guys. Thanks.